powered by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Doug, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles McLennan. Got the Leafs in action tonight. Got the national championship game tonight on TSN, Ohio State versus Notre Dame. And Luke Willson coming up here in a moment. Get into a number of things with Luke. Look back on the weekend, including Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator from the Lions. He got out quick. He has accepted the job with the Chicago Bears. And I think that's a smart play. I think if you're in Detroit, you got to be a little bit concerned. Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, he might leave too. Although it didn't look great for him on Saturday night. But I didn't think it looked great for Ben Johnson either.
Dude, I've heard you often talk about positions where you stated that might not be a position that would be envious. That's like, who would want to go to Chicago with that graveyard they've been mowing through? Like, I get it. Everybody wants that dream. They're like, I'm getting the chance to be an NFL head coach. But have they not seen what's gone on before them? Like, it's one guy after another guy after another guy. What makes you think that you're going to be the guy? And that's, I guess, what motivates guys to go there, because they are going to be that guy.
That's, I think, what it always comes down to is you're competitive and you think I'm different than everyone else. Like, that's the nature of sports, right? Happens all the time, and I'm sure Ben Johnson's looking at it the way others have looked at it, and maybe he's a believer in Caleb Williams. Maybe he's a believer that they've got some offensive pieces there.
I'll tell you what, that Dan Orlovsky, he said months before that draft that Daniels is the guy that
this is what is crushing if you're a Bears fan, okay? They drafted Mitchell Trubisky instead of Patrick Mahomes.
Yes.
And Deshaun Watson in that draft. Now, I know Mahomes was never really being talked about as a guy that would
Mitchell
go second
Trubisky
overall.
You drafted.
But still, they moved up to take Mitchell Trubisky, and then they get the first pick, and they take Williams, and you have to be terrified that Jayden Daniels is going to be legitimately a superstar. He's obviously had a remarkable year, but it is 1 year. C.J. Stroud was remarkable last year. This year he came back down to earth. I would caution people crowning Jayden Daniels quite yet. Not taking anything away from what he's done. Still very young, right? There could be some ups and downs. There might be a sophomore slump. But as of now, it has to be terrifying if you're in Chicago that they took the wrong guy again. Because Daniels looks amazing. Yeah. Like the performance he put on Saturday,
and you said
what he did the week before in Tampa.
It wasn't an opinion statement. Right. It's fact that rookie quarterbacks do not win in the playoffs.
No, they don't.
And this guy, I mean, who knows where they take this? Like, are they going to play the Eagles and get their ass handed to them? Probably so.
I mean, they went into Philly like a month ago and won the ball game. You know, like
a last-second victory.
Yeah, it's a divisional game, and anything can happen here. I don't know.
I know, but we got Luke coming on, so I can ask him this too. But like, how big of an upset was that? The Commander, like, was it
big, man?
Were you like shocked, like shocked, or like, where were you at? Moderately?
Yes, I was somewhere between very surprised and shocked. I was shocked it was to the point, like it played out the way it played out. Like if you had have told me some miraculous, 2-minute drill and Daniels does something crazy and they win by a point or a last-second field goal, that would have been very surprising. This was, Washington was in the driver's seat the whole game, more or less. And Jared Goff really struggled. But Daniels and that offense were so great. And I thought the Lions were going to come out of the NFC. I thought it set up perfectly for them. Home field. Again, the Commanders don't have a history of winning. They've got a rookie quarterback, a head coach in Dan Quinn who's, on the job for the first time this year. They're coming off a bye. Yes, they had injuries on the defense, clearly. But it didn't look that bad 2 weeks ago when they destroyed Minnesota. Right? Like 2 weeks ago, they crushed Minnesota with all the same guys.
You can't say injuries caught up with us.
Right, exactly. You still finished with the first seed with all those injuries. You went into San Francisco week 17 with injuries and won that game. You just got beat, man. Like Goff threw it away. He played poorly, made some really poor decisions, and Daniels and the Commanders came in and just said, we're not losing.
My fear is that there might be some similarities with the Vancouver Canucks, how last year the Vancouver Canucks, everything was aces, and they had this team, and they've got it all together, and it's like, are they going to morph back into the Detroit Lions again? Like,
that would be scary.
Timing is everything. If you're a Lions fan, you got to be thinking, we want this to be somewhat of a long-term plan here, where we're not just good for 2 years and now we're garbage again.
Well, if you smell what the
Willson
is cooking.
All right.
Well, let's bring in a longtime Lions fan, right, from southwestern Ontario, a former Lion himself.
Proud Lion.
Proud Lion. Here's our boy Luke Willson. Luke, how would you answer that? Are you at all concerned that a window closed here for the Detroit Lions?
Yeah. I don't think it's fully shut by any means, but I think, it's going to get tougher. I think it's going to get much, much tougher. They can still do it. I think next year it's going to be even more challenging after that year ends. But what I'll say is for Detroit, and I have very firsthand knowledge of how this feels, is let's say they end up doing it next year. In this locker room with this coaching staff, there's always going to be that, what if we got out of our own way. And obviously, for me, it's one play that you think about. But for the Lions, I think they'll be kind of right there where you look at last year. I thought they should have won that NFC Championship game, as I think a lot of people did. And then you look at this game against the Commanders, they have no business not beating the Commanders. And I tip my hat to Jayden Daniels. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. The guy was incredible. But Detroit across the board is a better team than the Commanders. They have no business turning the ball over 5 times and doing what they did. I felt for Goff because I thought that was uncharacteristic of him. He hasn't had many games like that this year. He's been usually really good. I thought the trick play was an absolute abomination, but as you guys know, I'm not the biggest trick play guy on planet Earth. And, Hayes, you talk about windows, what'll happen with this Lions team. And again, I do draw a lot of parallels to Seattle. Now, our talent was mainly on the other side of the football, on defense. But when you have all these young guys, like Aiden Hutchinson, is obviously he's on defense, but Jahmyr Gibbs, Laporta, you've already paid Sewell, you got Goff locked in, you paid Montgomery, you're going to pay these guys. And you can. There's this whole myth like you can't pay guys. You can pay your guys that you draft, and you can pay the stars when they become those guys. But where you get jammed up is you miss the meat and potatoes then of the rest of your roster. I always laugh because the year we won it, some of our best quote-unquote football players were not household names. Like I remember we had a D lineman named Red Bryant, and I was like, this guy is incredible at football. We are D tackle Brandon Mebane, our center Max Unger. These guys were not perennial all-pro players, but in the same breath, they were phenomenal football guys, great locker room guys, just like everything you dream about probably as a coach to have on your team. Well, now all of a sudden, when you pay all the stars, you can't afford that, upper-tier veteran guy, that kind of lunch pale dude, and you sit there and you got a team full of stars and rookies or vet minimum guys. And I think that, it was pretty telling for us, and I think Detroit will go this way, where now all of a sudden you're like, man, yeah, I still have these guys, but we've got a real weak position group here, or we've got this going on. And then also, you see it firsthand, Ben Johnson just signed, I believe, today with the Bears.
Yes, he did. Yep.
So our OC, who we're used to his lingo, we're used to his calls, we're used to everything he does, is now gone. And I'm not saying you can't find another OC. I'm not saying that. But there's going to be some growing pains there. And does that cost you a game or two next year? Maybe. And then does that cost you the 1 seed? Most likely. And now what I'm saying is tougher is you don't have the bye week. You're not playing every game at home. So that was a bit of a long-winded rant, but I cannot believe that Detroit let this one slip through their hands.
Partsy, before we get into the specifics of the game, is there anything you've been seeing in the guys that have advanced, Buff, KC, Philly, Washington? I know you've talked in the past about like the line of scrimmage and the physicality of it, like going to 2 Super Bowls. Have you seen something in the winners where like, yep, they're doing that, and that's why they're moving on? Yes, and I thought Josh Allen was a huge emphasis of this yesterday, and I'm glad you asked that question because this is my era. This is what I was taught, and it worked. But I remember for all the things about Pete Carroll out there and his energy, whatever.
every single day, Partsy, every day, he would come in and talk about turnovers.
Yeah.
We had a designated day every week and say this is Turnover Thursday, and it would be a competition between the offense and defense to see who would win. Every week of every year that I was in Seattle, we had that day. And every week he would come up there and give our rankings as far as where we are on the plus-minus. Then he would give historical context and be like, teams that win the turnover margin win games in this league. It was always somewhere in the 80%. And again, I'm sure it's similar to that now. And then he'd go like, if you're +2, it bumps to this. If you're +3, it bumps to 90-something. On and on and on and on. And he'd be like, listen, we can coach all this stuff up, but if we turn the ball over, it does not matter. And I look at these games, and let's go with the Bills, Ravens, and the Ravens sit here and lose by 2, and you're -3 in the turnover battle. And again, if you're -2, you probably win, which is, they outplayed them. Let's put it that way. I did think that at the end of the day, the Ravens, shot themselves in the foot. And I do tip my cap to Josh Allen because he did everything he needed to do. And I go to the Chiefs, and the Chiefs obviously didn't have the quote-unquote turnover. So that was the thing they'll say, like, oh, well, the Texans didn't turn the ball over. Well, what's the difference between turning the ball over and missing a 55-yard field goal? If you would have thrown a pick on 4th down, it's the same thing. So you sit there, and it's like, hey, the Chiefs came out here, played very, very well situationally. They gave up 12 points. 14 was the final number, but that was because of the safety. They gave up 12 points. They got crucial 3rd down sacks. They were able to at least create a long field goal that missed. You got a mistake by the kicker on the extra point. And the next thing you know, you win by 9. So, again, at this point, Partsy, it's not about numbers. It's not about stats. It's not about anything. It's about winning football games. And the best way to win football games is to not turn the ball over, find a way to get some, and do the simple things right. And I think you saw that this weekend.
All right, something to chew on brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. This January at BP, get delicious, mouth-watering pastas starting at $11.99 every single day. Enjoy the pastas you love at prices you can't miss. Hustle in your local BP tonight. Asking online, Luke, who's to blame for the Ravens' defeat against the Bills yesterday? Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, or simply the Bills were a better team? How would you answer that?
Oh, gosh. I would say, to me, that's tough.
That's a great question. Doogie nailed this one.
Yeah, if I had to pick, I would say none of the above, but if I had to pick out of those 3, I would go Lamar.
I agree. I agree.
Just not good enough?
Well, you're basically playing from behind. You're playing from behind the
because
whole
of him, and that's important. Sorry to cut you off here, but listen,
yeah.
there's it's a 60-minute game for a reason. The second half was Mark Andrews' fault, no question. That fumble was inexcusable, and he's got to catch that ball. But the first half was all Lamar. Awful pick, awful fumble. It was 7-0 after the pick, and then 7-7 after the pick, 7-7 after the fumble. He had 2 opportunities to keep the lead for Baltimore, and he threw it away twice.
That fumble looks horrible. He purposely dropped it.
Well,
stupid.
He got careless. Yeah. He got careless, and yes, the second half that's on Andrews undoubtedly. But you're not in a position where you're chasing the game if Lamar plays better in the first half.
I am definitely exactly on board with that, and O-Dog, what you said about the fumble too. He just dropped it. Like everyone's saying on the thing, and I don't want to be that guy, but one thing that's getting annoying with the Bills. Or, like, if DeMar Hamlin makes a play, people are like, it was DeMar. Like, it's supposed to be better than anyone else, given the circumstance. I'm like, Lamar dropped the football. Like, I'm glad DeMar was there. But anyways, he basically, and you said he's careless with the ball. The corner route, that was shocking to me, the interception. I don't know who's wrong there. I'm assuming it's Lamar. But they're off by 15 yards. Mm-hmm. That's not even close. And the miscommunication there, the fumble, I sit there and I'm like, man, Lamar's doing it again. And what's weird to me is that across the board, and I'm sure Bills fans will be mad about this, but that's the best team in the NFL. And that's including the Lions, that's including the Eagles, that's including the Chiefs. On paper, the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. You don't need anything else than what they have. They got Lamar, who can clearly do it all. Derrick Henry, when they finally got him loose, looked in that second half. I'm like, oh God, he's going to break a big one. It's a matter of time. He's going to break a big one. You got the best run defense in the NFL. Now, they got pushed around a little bit in the first half yesterday, but they did a better job in the second half. And the pass defense got astronomically better down the stretch. And again, you sit there and you don't need to be Superman. Like, you just don't. Look at Josh Allen. Didn't need to do it. And I didn't think Lamar had to until the fourth quarter. And that's that. And the reason I don't put it on Andrews is because I will say that I did feel like Josh played the game efficiently well. Like, he knew exactly the task at hand. He knew exactly what they needed to do. He got a window with this early lead.
What about the final play, Partsy? Was that like a...
Yeah, he's got to catch that ball.
Was that... You got to catch that ball, or does the throw need to be better?
You got to catch it. That's okay. I'd say 90% got to catch it. 10% the throw could have helped him. But my point with Josh is that he would have got the ball back with timeout.
Right. That's getting lost here. It would have been tied, and the Bills had a minute 33 with 2 timeouts at home.
There's no way that Josh doesn't. In my opinion, Josh Allen, as much as I love to rag on the Bills, that's like giving Patty Mahomes the ball. Josh is going right down the field. Mm-hmm. Now, if Bass makes the kick, is a different story. Okay, but there's no way in my head that Josh Allen doesn't take that ball and get them into field goal range.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
I think the Ravens did more to lose that game than the Bills did to win it, but that I don't mean that disparagingly against the Bills. In a way, that's a compliment, because I think when they needed to do what they needed to do, it happened every single time. The first drive of the game, Baltimore goes right down the field, punches in 6. I think it was imperative that the Bills came right back out and matched it. They did that. They come out in the second half. They're up 21-10, a little bit conservative, 3 and out. Then they give up a field goal. Then they go like 6 and out. They move the chains once. Then they give up that touchdown where Henry and Hill just absolutely shredded their defense. And at that point, we were in the group chat, and I said, it is imperative the Bills put up points here. They have to stop the bleeding, and they did. They put up points when they had to. And that was a perfect example of that. Like Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, the Bills, they looked at it and said, these guys, they're turning the ball over. We've got the lead. We can put ourselves in a position to win. And they did. And it wasn't overly flashy or sexy, but who cares, man? That's what Mahomes and the Chiefs have been doing all year. And those are the two teams standing in the AFC.
I agree. And speaking of that group chat, I think the toughest part is, for me, I'm sitting there, and when Andrews caught that first down, and I believe the score was 21-16 at that point, and this was after the 6 and out, I'm like, open the floodgates. This thing's going to be 45-30 by the end of this.
Yeah.
Like, Derek's going to break a big one, sort of like Saquon did in the other game. We're live right now, and I'm getting my fingers warm up to just run my mouth. And when he fumbled that ball, I was devastated. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way being -3 you beat Josh Allen and the Bills.
No. Well, and listen, the fumbles, you know how it is. Sometimes it's just luck, too, like where it fumbles, where it goes, who's around. And not only did the Bills recover, they took off. They picked up yardage. Like, it broke their way, and to their credit, now they got Kansas City waiting for them. And, I guess we'll do an early look ahead here. You've got Kansas City versus the Bills, Washington versus the Eagles. Kansas City favored, Eagles favored, both teams at home. How do we set up the week here? Where does your head go first?
So I'll start with the tougher matchup, which I'm going to assume we're going to have to pick Partsy, which is the Bills versus the Chiefs. And I think they're very evenly matched. And this is, if I want to cross the board, I think you give Mahomes and Josh Allen a wash. 1A, 1B. These are the two best guys you want in this situation.
Why don't we pick the game? We're ahead. We're leading.
No, because it's whoever won the regular season, man.
We should pick the game.
Dude.
Consistent throughohout the playoffs. We get to choose.
That's embarrassing.
We get to choose. You guys did it last year.
The Rampage has started, though, Partsy. Don't worry.
6-5, man. It's 6-5. We feel great about where we're at. We're seeing the board again.
Hayes, I'm going to go back in the NFC AFC Championships, but I have a couple questions before you kick me off about the situation, because Doogie right now is trying to jam us, and I'll explain. But back to the AFC Championship. I think that the Bills have a better offensive line and a better run game than the Chiefs. But I would give the Chiefs a slight edge as far as their pass catchers. I like the combination of D-Hop, Travis Kelce, and Hollywood Brown a lot more than I would say Kincaid, Shakir, and Amari Cooper. And then on the other side, I like as a whole, by a lot, the Chiefs' defense, especially when you have a guy like Chris Jones. But what I'll say is the equalizer here is that the Bills' defense is number one in the league right now, taking the ball away.
Right.
I think this is a very, very tight game, and I think it comes down to one simple stat that I've been harping on, turnover margin. Because whoever can steal that possession, if the Chiefs are +1 in the turnover, they win. If they're -1 and the Bills are +1, the Bills win. I think it's going to be that close.
What about the refs? If you're in Buffalo, are you not terrified right now?
Dude.
I'm
There was
not.
lots
I
of
am.
memes.
I'm sorry, man. Mahomes is risking, like, you can't flop like that. It's so embarrassing the way he flops. That's not football.
Okay.
That's embarrassing. He's won 3 Super Bowls, all these MVPs. You start flopping, looking for calls when it's not
Didn't he
necessary.
have a
It's
situation
embarrassing.
earlier in the season where he asked the ref to give him a heads up if a guy was coming earlier in the season?
He was mic'd.
Yeah.
He was mic'd on that one.
Like
yeah.
this call where it was like the Texans helmet to helmet. That's not unnecessary rough. That's an embarrassing call. And credit to Aikman because Aikman called it out immediately.
Aikman's the man. I agree.
It was a brilliant
both
analysis.
Calls were ridiculous.
Awful.
The first one on Will Anderson, what I think happened is the guy who throws it, and this is a thing, and Pete would talk to us about this, is know where the guy calling penalties stands at. So if you look at it, when we get the view of the TVs, okay, that's one thing where it's like, oh, yeah, it wasn't really head-to-head, it was more to his chest. The guy who calls it is behind him. He doesn't see the original thing. So that one I still don't think, I want to be very clear, I do not think should have been a penalty, but I get how it was closer. The slide earlier was 1,000%. I think that was when Aikman was disgusted about. It was not a penalty. But what I was annoyed with the Texans is I could not believe the narrative of the referees. They scored 12 points. The 14 they got was because of the safety. There is not a team in the NFL right now, I can tell you this right now, that can sit here and say, we're going to score 12 and beat Patrick Mahomes. It will not happen. So, again, as much as you want to blame those 2 plays as the game outcome, the Texans went out here and their kicker was an abomination. The 55-yarder missed by 45 yards.
Fairbairn, like walking back to Houston.
Yes, missed an extra point. DJ Stroud took some very, very bad sacks, and they scored 1 touchdown. And it got a couple field goals. Like, that's not going to cut it. So as much as I do think those were bad calls, it was a 9-point win, which if they punt, it actually is an 11-point win. It's not, again,
Chiefs are still better. Chiefs executed better, unquestionably. But
yes.
the Bills are not going to do what Houston did. And if it comes down to a flag late, it's just going to lead to heads exploding. If it's right, Noodles, I mean, you know what's coming. People are nervous about it.
It leads to that narrative that they think that the league is rigged. That's all you see on Twitter is like, oh, here we go. And all the memes of Mahomes, like, hugging and kissing the refs and all, all sorts of things.
They're really good. They are good.
They are so funny. But, Luke, before we get you out of here, I had a question for you. What did you make of Dan Campbell laying all the blame and all the tears and all that type of performance at the podium?
I think he's an emotional guy. He's kind of been that way, and I respect him laying the blame. You guys have heard me gripe about this a million times, and it's the trick plays. And when they work, all these, I'm going to be a bit annoying, but the novice fans think they're the coolest things on planet Earth. These are sick. And I'm going to tell you exactly, for the dawn of time and for the continuance of the dawn of time, teams that use trick plays, these are the general scenarios. There's 2 different times you use a trick play. One is you've got some sort of tell on film. In college, this happens a lot. In the pros, it's very, very rare, where you're like, hey, this guy overcommits, or they're coaching him here, and it's 100%er, and we're going to run this trick play. We ran a trick play in the NFC Championship game. It was a fake field goal against Hayes' Packers. Mm-hmm. That was 100%er. We probably watched 55 snaps, and it was all on where A.J. Hawk was lined up on. It was either coming to me or going to Gary Gilliam, depending on where A.J. Hawk was. So, and John Ryan, shout out Saskatchewan, was throwing it. We thought it was going to go to me, so we called the play Pam Anderson because it was a Canadian to a Canadian. We altered that at the line. Okay, that's option one. Option two, when you run a trick play, is generally when you're not good enough. Because you sit there and you say, if we're in this game, we're going to need that spark. We're going to need that, big play, and we probably can't hang with these guys. So we're going to draw up a trick play and gamble and hope it works. When you're as good as the Detroit Lions, you don't need them. And I get that they had some success this year with trick plays. When you're up 20 and teams are all hands on deck and you're like, man, we got to find a way, we're getting gashed right now, and you do a trick play, one, I think it's just stupid that you burned it off your card because you can't rerun that trick play. And two, it's like, oh, congrats, it looks sweet. It's going to make everybody's highlight reel. But when you're down 10 to a defense that is bend not break, that you are gashing outside of turning the ball over. Why? Why do we give the ball to Jameson Williams to throw it?
Oh.
And then, of course, in the infamous words of every OC when they run a trick play, if it's not open, throw it out of bounds. But you know what wide receivers will never do? Throw it out of bounds. And I thought that was a huge play in the game because the way the Lions can score, they're never out of a football game, but they just give another turnover, and Jayden Daniels made him pay.
Yep.
That's the end of my trick play rant.
That's exactly it. Like, it's one thing to pull off a trick play where, flea flicker, back to Goff, it didn't work. You put the ball in Jameson Williams' hands down 10. And now the guy who I guess, came up with the trick plays is Ben Johnson. Now he's the head coach of the Bears. Like, will he just carry that over in Chicago, Luke? Or, like, what if he gets there and he's like, no trick plays? Dan Campbell was forcing that upon me. We're not doing that type of behavior here.
It's funny because I would actually argue that Chicago would need the trick plays based on Detroit.
Possibly, yeah. Chasing teams.
But it would be fascinating to know who called that. So there's two ways this can go. And you got to know the relationship between Ben and Dan Campbell. But is that one thing where Ben Johnson was like, hey, I've got this on the card and I think it'll work here, and then Dan says do it? Or is that Dan going, hey, I want a spark here, run the trick play? Because that is generally how it goes. It generally goes where the head coach will bring up, I want to run this trick play, let's do it.
I'm glad you clarified that because, like, everyone, I tweeted out Dan Campbell, just Dan Campbell, then people like, it was Ben Johnson. I'm like, guys, the head coach, like, makes the call on the pulse of the game plan, right? Like, in other words.
Totally. So Ben will draw the play up. Ben will definitely draw that, like, the creation of the play is Ben.
Right.
But the idea of whether we're calling it and when to call it on every team I've played on generally is driven by the head coach.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's even before the drive. Like, he'll say on the headset, hey, if we get to the 40 here, I want to hit the trick play, whatever the name of it is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, and again, it's unfair to Dan Campbell, but I just put Bill Belichick in his shoes, and there's just no way Josh McDaniels would be like, hey, Bill, I'm going to run this trick play in this situation.
I do like a trick play in a massive moment, though. Don't forget the Foles trick play, Eagles.
Yeah, the Philly 2 or whatever it was called.
In the Super Bowl.
That was a great play.
Philly special.
Philly special. It worked.
Right. And it worked.
Yes.
If it doesn't work, you look like a dummy.
That's the conundrum. If it doesn't work, you're a meatball. If it works, you're a genius. I mean, that's pro sports
in a nutshell. In that Philly special, I would love to know, but again, from my experience with the trick plays I've ran, I would love to know why they had that in. And why I say that is I'm guessing they're like, hey, this guy or whoever's supposed to fall back gets wildly nosy, or there's a 90% chance they're in this coverage, and Nick Foles will be wide open, yada, 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 yada. When you run 15 trick plays a year, you're not doing that anymore. You're just simply making stuff up. Like, we would have, I'm not joking, we would have trick plays that would live for 12 weeks sometimes, 14 weeks. Hey, this is our trick play, and we love it. and we're going to practice it once a week, maybe once every other week, but like we're not actually going to call it until we need to execute it. So that's another thing with these trick plays is it's like you don't roll into a game with 15 trick plays. These are a weekly thing that you might have practiced twice in a walkthrough and twice in practice. Mm-hmm. They're very high risk. I guess that would be my point.
Well, we've got ourselves a barn burner here, ladies and gentlemen. 6'5", Owen Wilson currently leading Hazenborough. These totals are jamming us, man, but we saw the board beautifully. All four of us, complete redemption on behalf of the show. Last week was an absolute embarrassment. An absolute embarrassment last week. We went 0 for 6 on the spread. This week, we went 4-0. So everything's coming together now, and we're going to have ourselves quite the weekend next week. All right, buddy, we'll catch up later in the week, and we'll get to those picks and set the scene more for the conference championships.
Bartsy, the Rampage will continue. We're going full steam ahead this weekend. We're seeing the board clearly. You better hope, Hayes, that you make the right pick. We might clinch, depending on what you decide.
Not possible.
I'm getting hats made that say Rampage in capital letters.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. All right, see you, Luke. Luke Willson, Rampage.
Rampage.
You guys need the.
Isn't there a wrestler, Rampage Jackson or something?
He's a UFC
no,
fighter.
He's a UFC fighter.
Yeah, he's a good fighter too, man. Nasty.
Scary fighter.
Scary fighter. Scary fighter.
Why? Is that not the right name?
No, yeah, it was Rampage Jackson. That was his name.
Jackson, yeah. Big time. Like scary UFC fighter. Yeah, like just old school. He was in the Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell, Rampage Jackson, like that era. Like that was UFC 100. I remember being at a bar sitting in a booth, and those three were sitting in the booth. Like
just looking
shirts
for fights.
off. After the fights, UFC 100, we were in a group with them because Tito Ortiz was a huge hockey fan and brought us in there.
You guys want to see Screech getting chirped, or you want to take a break and come back?
Why don't we come back and see that, all right? Let's come back, and we'll put Screech on blast here, all right? Yeah. Because there is, unfortunately, a Blue Jays analogy here at work. Although the Jays are starting to get out of this, right? Anthony Santander signing a 5-year deal today. So switch hitter with power coming up.
If
right?
there was
Even
a booth
Baltimore.
outside, if there was a guy with a booth outside selling like Screech, there's my guy.
There's Rampage Jackson.
There's
scary.
He
a
could
booth
throw
outside
bombs.
of the dome that's got like a Screech picture with Blue Jays logo. Would you buy a T-shirt and wear it into the ballpark?
I might.
I would.
I would as of today. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. There's still more off season, and it could change. But today, I think that's a pretty lucrative business plan. Unfortunately.
But I get some hoodies made with just Screech on the front.
The Screech in his tux with the flowers.
Holding the flowers.
All right. We'll come back with some Screech. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, Leafs Lightning tonight. Get to that in just a moment. Got Chris Johnston coming up in about a half an hour. But the Jays making a signing today. This is big. Keegan Matheson will join us in an hour. Anthony Santander, good player, 44 home runs, switch hitter, brings some power to the middle of the lineup. Good signing. Positive move for the Blue Jays and something they desperately needed because I think on Friday it peaked in terms of embarrassment with Suzuki choosing the Dodgers naturally. That's another thing. Like earlier in the day,
that, though, it was taking on the other contract with the
Guardians.
The international. Yeah. Explain that, like the
okay. So this is where again, like it's almost like a conspiracy theory that Jays fans are trying to figure out. Like, is the whole league just punking the Blue Jays? Because reports came out earlier in the day that the Padres had been tipped off that they were out on Sasaki.
Yes.
So why would they get tipped off, but the Blue Jays didn't get tipped off? Like, that is something that I desperately want to know.
Well, when you have three teams, he might have just called them and said, you're out of contention.
Right. But why drag the Jays along and not the Padres is what I'm asking.
For more money.
Well, I get that, but he didn't get any more money. That's the whole point. With the Dodgers, they only had so much money they could give him. And he took the $6.35 million or whatever it was from the Dodgers and left the $10 million on the table from the Jays. And the Jays, they didn't get the message or something that you're not actually going to get them. So they called up Cleveland and said, we need some more international pool money, bonus money, so we can give to Sasaki. In order to get that, they took on Miles Straw, who probably won't play a game for them, has like $11 million or $12 million left on his ticket. The Guardian said, sure, go ahead, take the pool money. You got to take this guy with you. And then like 2 hours later, Sasaki's like, Screech, we're going to the Dodgers. Like, why would you think we were coming there? And that's what I can't figure out, why the Jays thought they could get him. And that's why on Friday I was bullish on the idea of them getting him. Because I'm like, why would you make this trade at the last hour to get the international pool money if you don't know you're getting them? Yeah. It's incompetence. It's embarrassing.
You only pull the trigger on that if you know you're getting them.
It's crazy.
Exactly.
And that's what was so embarrassing. And then Tanner Scott signs with the Dodgers, and then immediately John Heyman or whoever it was, Jays were in on him too. Like, it's just like it's like an archived tweet. Anyone signs anywhere, it's Jays also in on that guy. So you have peak embarrassment if you're a Blue Jay fan, because the whole baseball community is punking you and goofing on you and treating you like Screech Powers.
It is Screech, but it's become a punchline. Like they're runner up every time. You see it all the time in hockey. I'm not going to name the names, but it's like, oh, that guy was second. This guy was up for the job. It's the same three people that you hear for GM jobs. Oh, that guy was. No, they weren't.
No,
like,
he
it's
wasn't.
Just not even close.
That guy wasn't getting the job.
Exactly, and the same thing. It's like the Jays were in on it. Well, of course. I mean, they should be in on all of these players. That's the job of a good manager, or at least a manager's supposed to be calling on it. But don't make it like they're the runner-up every time. Like, to me, that's where the embarrassment comes
Jamie,
from.
The embarrassment, how much of this falls on management when time and time again, and I'm sure some of the fan base has this question, when player after player chooses another team, how much is that on Ross and Mark when the player picks another team? Like, they're throwing boatloads of money in at the finish line every time the player says it's going to be the Dodgers. How much do they have to wear that? Or how much is, like, if there was a pie chart of responsibility, how much is on those two people?
Listen, I would use game analogies, right? We just talked about Lamar Jackson, and we talk about pro athletes all the time. You've got to take advantage of your chance to shine. You've got to win the games, or else you lost. The offseason, this is management's game 7. Like, your game 7 is you're in the boardroom and you're trying to sell a guy on choosing you. If you keep losing, you have to wear that. Now, of course, there's more to it. It's deeper than that. There's more variables. You're competing with other teams that you just simply can't compete with in terms of a number of different reasons. But I think also at the core of it, from the Blue Jays pitching standpoint, and I mean pitching to free agents, is they're not that good. And they don't have anybody signed long-term. Like, the reports came out, the guys that they brought up to pitch to Sasaki, like pitch the case of the Blue Jays, were Bo Bichette,
Varsho,
Dalton Varsho, and Chad Green. Green's been here for a year, and he's a free agent after this year. Bo's a free agent after this year.
None of them are starting pitchers. He's Chad Green.
And he's Chad Green. Like, he's got no connection to the Jays. Where's Vladdy? Yeah. Where's Gosman? Where's Barrios? Like, where are the starting pitchers that represent this team? Sasaki's a starter.
I thought that as soon as I saw that tweet. I'm like, so Chad Green is what, going to the airport and taking this guy out for dinner?
Exactly. Like, where are they going? To a Wendy's out by the airport? Then he's motoring them back to Pearson? Hey, quick drive-through, Roki, and then I got to get out of here because I'm Chad Green and I got bigger and better things to do. Guy flies to L.A. and Ohtani's waiting for him.
Right.
I
told you what lines up in L.A. It's Dave Roberts, Mookie Betts, Ohtani, and Freddie Freeman.
Yes.
And we're chucking Chad Green at the airport.
Right. And a drive-through by the airport. Oh, man.
There's got to be an excuse for that, though.
Well,
there's got to be some sort of, like...
Rocky, you want to hit a Wendy's drive?
I know a place out here.
That'll knock your socks off.
Yeah, I got a place out by the airport you've got to see.
We got to show this.
Okay, let's play the Screech. All right, so this is the movie made. It's Jon Favreau, Vince Vaughn. It's coming off the movie Swingers, right? They're trying to take advantage of something that got hot. They're outside of a club in New York, and they're trying to get into the club, and Screech shows up.
You might want to check if he's here, because he specifically said we're supposed to meet him in the VIP area.
He's not here.
Yeah, well, I'm on the list. I told you.
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey,
what's happening?
Could you just check to see?
Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
All right, bro.
Hey, man, how's it going? look big, man. You been lifting?
Hey, thanks. Yeah, a little bit. I got a 6-pack. Started out with a 40.
All right.
Big.
You look good, man.
All right, thanks, man. Catch you later.
Cool.
Did you see that? Did you just let Screech in the club? I'm waiting in line, and you just let Screech in the club.
He's on the list, man.
Show me the list.
Screech is in the club. Screech. You just let Screech in the club, and I'm waiting in line. That would sting if you thought you were a big shooter back in the day and Screech comes rolling
and he
in.
wheels by you.
Yeah. That was also Furio from The Sopranos. You notice that? Furio from The Sopranos was running the door at that club.
Yeah.
But anyway, listen, we're moving in the right direction here if you're the Jays. Anthony Santander is a good signing. Take him, bring it. He helps. See what else you got. Right?
Yeah. You have to get the hoodies, though, The three of them. We've got the hoodies. Who is that with the who's falling down after the putt?
Greg Norman.
Greg Norman. We have the Greg Norman hoodies. We're going to have the Screech hoodies.
Yes,
we need
Screech
that.
at the door when Lisa Turtle and Zach Morris are getting after it. That's heartbreaking.
That's just a picture.
It's a heartbreaking picture, man. It's a heartbreaking picture. It's a heartbreaking reality.
Yeah,
it is.
Tweet us the actual, just an Indo ISO of Screech with the flowers because I need it for the hoodies. I don't want Zach in it. I just want Screech.
No, Zach making out with her. You don't want that. You just want him.
Or what do you want, Hayes? You want the whole shebang?
I don't know. There's a part. I think you kind of need the two, making out because that's what leads to Screech just crumbling, man.
So you want the whole shebang?
Yeah. I don't know.
I think so.
Maybe we can put it to a vote. Do we just isolate Screech for the hoodies, or do we get everyone involved? I think everyone paints the whole picture, right, Noodles? Like, you kind of need to.
Okay, we'll do everything. We'll do it all.
Have Joe from the Bridge put it up again, but we need to see that. It might be just that.
Like, you want an ISO of Screech, or do you want the whole wide shot?
Look at Screech.
You know what? Like, that is. I think you need the whole shot.
Yeah, I think you can. Look at the sweater on Zach Morris, man. That show was wild. Saved by the Bell.
Is that a double collar popped up?
Yeah. That's a triple, man. That's a jacket with a double pop on top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did he have?
Now, Dustin Diamond, that guy.
Sure did.
Screech had a tough life. Like,
that's Dave Robertson.
I believe he's passed away. Right?
He did pass away, I believe. Yes.
Screech passed away.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Dustin Diamond is his name.
Yeah, he was. I think he became like a porn star, and there are all sorts of bad things on. It's a really bad story. It's a sad story, but we could still have a laugh about the actual that scene.
Well, that's a TV show. I mean, we're calling it. It's about Screech. Yeah. It's not about the real life stuff.
Exactly. That picture we need for
Chris
sure.
Johnston in 20 minutes. Keegan Matheson on the Jays signing today. The Jays, throughout the offseason and what could still happen the rest of the way. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, we sent Al's brother out into the city with a pair of Leaf tickets, and you have to guess where he's hiding for your chance to win them. This week we're giving away tickets to the Leafs and Wild next Wednesday. You guys ready for the first clue of the week?
Hit me.
Yeah.
Hey, OD fans, happy Monday to you. Back for another set of clues this week to get yourself a pair of Leafs tickets. It's Leafs versus Wild on Wednesday, January 29th. Got to find out where I'm hiding at this week. Here is your Monday clue. After my vacation and then trip to Aurora last week, I'm happy to be back in the city of Toronto for this week. But I got to tell you, it is absolutely freezing outside right now. So I'm going to be staying indoors this week and head into one of the biggest, most beautiful buildings in the city to do it.
Look at Al's brother. Is he trespassing or is he allowed in there? Not sure.
What do you say it's at one of the
most beautiful buildings in the city? What's a beautiful building in Toronto?
What does he consider a beautiful building?
That's a better question. Exactly.
That's true.
All right, tune in tomorrow for another clue. And the first caller through on Friday with the correct location wins a pair of tickets again to see Leafs Wild next Wednesday. Find Al's Brothers brought to you by McAlpine Ford in Aurora, our family, the Ford family, and you. Full details at tsn1050.ca. So Joseph Woll will make his 25th start of the year, which for most goalies is an inconsequential stat, but for him it means something because it's more starts than he's had at any point in his pro career. Never started 25 in a season, and he's going tonight.
Well, he's got to get to a point. Like, what would you want to see from him, Jamie? What would prep him for the playoffs coming down the stretch? If ultimately he's the guy.
just a stretch of games where we're assuming that, it's a story where he's not playing, if that makes sense. Like, he plays 8 of 10 and you're going, geez, he's got a level of consistency where you're like not worried about, like, one thing that's always been in the back of my mind with him playing a lot of games here is, if he's gotten up slow on a play or something, you're like, I want to get past that. Remember last year we were concerned, Samsonov, like we said, once he went down, you're like,
Jamie, that was my favorite part of some of Woll's saves the other night in Montreal is that he got up.
Right. Like, I think we're past that, knock on wood for him, but, like, that's the biggest thing. We're seeing some consistency out of him. He hasn't had, listen, when they were in that 3-game losing streak or whatever, he didn't play great, but neither did the team in front of him. So, it happens. But I thought he was great against Montreal. I just like to see him, put together a string of games here like he has. And it's just, hey, it's good quality goaltending every night, some consistency. And so far he's doing that. There's an off game here or there. But just to continue to do that, to get to maybe 45, 50 games, I don't know if he'll get that high, but if he gets somewhere, it's going to be mid-40s if he continues this pace.
Yeah, you would think so. And Stolarz was on the ice taking shots today. Calle Jarnkrok was out skating. I don't think those guys are that close to returning, but Stolarz will return at some point. But I thought, again, on Saturday, Woll just kept battling, man. Gave up 3 in the first period. It could have been 5 or 6.
Don't kid yourself. When any position, forward, defense, goalie, coaching, everybody involved to stay kind of in it down 3 Cobb in the big leagues, it's a tough thing to do.
It is. It could have been a white flag moment where they're like, forget it, it's not our night. They didn't. They didn't quit. That was a very, very big win.
Big goals
Saturday
from
night.
Guys like Robertson. Who was he? Bobby
McMahon, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I want to get into it more in the 6 o'clock hour.
All right, we'll get back into the game from the other night. And again, teeing up tonight, we're waiting on some McDavid news as well. The suspension likely comes down in the 6 p.m. hour. We'll be tracking to see what comes of it. Chris Johnston, Keegan Matheson in the final hour. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2.